I was standing just outside the glass doors holding a tray of food I had spent all afternoon preparing. The grill was still hot. The plates were warm in my hands. This was Adam's weekly dinner. His friends, his space, or at least that was how he described it. Then I heard him laugh. Not the casual laugh he used with me, but the loud, confident one he saved for other men. The kind that fills a room and demands approval. "I doubt this joke of a marriage will survive another year," Adam said. "She's nowhere near my level anymore." The words landed before I could move. Inside the backyard, his friends leaned back in their chairs, glasses raised. Someone clapped. Someone laughed harder than the rest. I saw nods, agreement, pride. They were sitting on furniture I chose, eating food I paid for, drinking wine I had been saving. And they were celebrating my replacement? For a few seconds, I stayed perfectly still. My body felt frozen, but my mind was painfully clear. I watched Adam accept their approval like a reward. I watched him glow as if he had finally said something brave instead of cruel. No one noticed me yet. That was the part that hurt most, not just the insult but how comfortably it lived in the room. This was not a slip. This was rehearsed, repeated, validated. I realized then that this was not about a bad night or a careless comment. This was how he spoke when he believed I was not listening. This was who he was when he thought he was safe. I set the tray down quietly. I did not cry. I did not interrupt. I did not storm in demanding explanations. I simply stood there long enough to understand one thing. This marriage was already over. The only question left was how long I was willing to pretend I did not know it. Before that night, people often described me as lucky. Lucky to have a successful company. Lucky to have a husband who was charming in public. Lucky to live the life everyone assumed was easy. What they never saw was how carefully I made myself smaller. I built my business from freelance work at a kitchen table, long before Adam ever talked about being an entrepreneur. When the company started growing, I handled the contracts, the clients, the late nights. Adam handled the stories, the ideas, the dreams that never quite made it past the talking stage. Every time one of his ventures failed, I absorbed the loss quietly. I told myself marriage meant patience. I told myself support was love. I told myself success was something we shared, even when I was the only one earning it. When my income surpassed his, I stopped mentioning numbers. When clients praised my work, I redirected credit. When he joked about being the visionary, I smiled and let him have it. Because protecting his ego felt easier than confronting the truth. I became the calm one. The reasonable one. The one who kept things running while pretending not to notice that the balance was gone. Friends would say, "You're such a strong couple." What they meant was I was strong enough for both of us. And I accepted that role without question. Until the night I heard my marriage described as a joke. Standing outside those doors, I understood something with terrifying clarity. I had not been unlucky in love. I had been loyal to someone who quietly resented the life I built. And once I saw that, there was no going back. I did not rehearse what I was about to say. There was no dramatic build-up, no speech forming in my head, just a calm certainty settling into my chest as I pushed the glass door open. The laughter stopped instantly. Adam turned toward me first, his smile still half-formed, frozen in the space between confidence and shock. His friends followed, eyes darting, glasses lowering, bodies stiffening like children caught doing something they knew was wrong. I stepped inside and set the tray down on the table. "Why wait a year?" I said, my voice steady, almost polite. "Let's end it tonight." No one spoke. Adam opened his mouth, then closed it again. The version of him that knew how to talk his way out of anything suddenly had nothing prepared. I did not accuse. I did not ask questions. I did not demand an explanation I already had. "I wouldn't want you trapped in a marriage you clearly don't respect," I continued, "especially with someone so far beneath your level." One of his friends looked down at the ground. Another pretended to check his phone. The approval they had been so generous with seconds earlier vanished. Adam finally found his voice. "Elena, we were just talking. You took it out of context." I shook my head once. "This is the context," I said. "This is who you are when you think I'm not listening." Then I turned and walked back inside the house. I did not wait for him to follow. I did not stay to watch his friends scatter. I did not look back to see if regret had finally reached his face. For the first time in years, I did not stay to manage his emotions. I had said the sentence that mattered. Everything after that was just logistics. I went straight to the bedroom. Not the guest room, not the couch, the room that still held the illusion of us. I pulled my suitcase from the closet and laid it open on the bed. The movements felt almost mechanical, like muscle memory from a life I did not remember training for. I packed what mattered. Work clothes first. The blazers I wore to meetings he never attended. The laptop bag that held my entire professional life. Jewelry I bought myself after major deals, each piece a quiet celebration I never announced. I skipped the things tied to memories. Those could stay behind. I was not running. I was separating. Adam appeared in the doorway, breath uneven, hair no longer perfectly styled. "Elena, please," he said. "Let's talk about this." "There's nothing to talk about," I replied without turning around. "You already did the talking." He tried to step closer. "You're overreacting. It was just words, guy talk." I zipped the suitcase closed and finally faced him. "You didn't joke about leaving," I said. "You joked about replacing me." The room fell quiet again. "I know about the lawyer," I continued. "I know about the account you opened without telling me. And I know you've been telling people I'm difficult to work with." His face drained of color. "How do you know that?" Because I had been paying attention longer than he thought. I lifted the suitcase from the bed. "I'm not leaving because you embarrassed me," I said. "I'm leaving because you planned to erase me." For the first time that night, he had nothing left to say. And I realized something else in that silence. I was not packing in grief. I was packing in clarity. I had just zipped the suitcase when my phone vibrated. One message, unknown number. "Check your husband's Thursday nights, you deserve to know what he's been planning." I stared at the screen, my pulse steady in a way that surprised me. I wasn't confused. I wasn't scared. Something inside me already knew this was not a coincidence. Another message followed seconds later. "I'm sorry it took me this long. I didn't know how to stop it." The name appeared then. Mark Reynolds. Adam's closest friend. The one who had toasted loudest. The one who had looked away when I spoke. I stepped into the hallway to take the call. Mark's voice was low, tight, like someone holding their breath. "Elena, I know this is the worst possible timing, but you need to hear this now." "Say it," I said. "What you heard tonight wasn't a joke," he said. "It was part of a plan." The word plan landed hard. For months, he continued, those Thursday nights weren't dinners, they were strategy meetings. "Adam's been documenting everything you do, emails, late nights, decisions, he's building a case." "A case for what?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "To make you look unstable," Mark said, "so he can take control of the company and walk away clean." The hallway felt suddenly too quiet. "I have proof," he added, "messages, notes, screenshots. I couldn't sit with it anymore." I closed my eyes for a moment. This wasn't betrayal anymore. This was a campaign. And for the first time that night, I understood something clearly. Ending the marriage was only the beginning. We met the next morning in a quiet cafe across town. Mark arrived early, already seated, his coffee untouched. He looked smaller than he had the night before, like the confidence he wore so easily around Adam had finally cracked. "There's a name for it," he said before I could sit down. "Adam called it Project Smokescreen." I didn't react. I just waited. "He said if he controlled the story, he could control the outcome," Mark continued. "That if people believed you were unstable, emotional, difficult, no one would question why he took over." He slid his phone across the table. Messages filled the screen. Group chats, long threads, Adam's words unmistakable. "Document everything. Frame it as concern. Let her think she's overreacting. If she gets angry, that helps us." My stomach tightened, but my hands stayed steady. "They planned it like a business launch," Mark said quietly. "Roles, timelines, talking points. Every Thursday night, Adam would update us, what you said that week, how you looked in meetings, who noticed you working late." I scrolled further. Notes about my tone in emails. Photos taken through office windows. Conversations rewritten to sound threatening or erratic. "He said you were changing," Mark added. "That success had gone to your head. that you needed to be managed before you destroyed everything. I looked up at him. And you believed him? At first I thought he was venting, he admitted. Then it became clear he wasn't angry. He was methodical. My coffee went cold between us. He wanted to leave you, Mark said, but not empty-handed. He wanted the company, the reputation, the sympathy. He wanted to walk away looking like the reasonable one. I leaned back in my chair, breathing slowly. This wasn't cruelty born from emotion. This was calculation. And the others? I asked. They followed, Mark said, because it was easier than calling him out, because no one wants to believe their friend is capable of something this ugly. I stood, picking up my bag. Send me everything, I said. Every message, every note. As I walked out, one truth settled firmly in place. Adam hadn't underestimated me. He had mistaken my silence for weakness. And that was about to cost him everything. That afternoon, Mark sent the files. Dozens of them. I opened the first folder and immediately understood how deep this went. Legal documents, registration forms, a newly created company with a name just close enough to mine to cause confusion. Same industry, same language, same promises. Adam had been building a shadow version of my business. He said it was a backup plan, Mark explained over the phone, in case you didn't cooperate. Didn't cooperate, as if I were an obstacle instead of the foundation. I scrolled through timelines showing when the company was registered, when initial outreach emails were drafted, when talking points were prepared. It wasn't impulsive, it was paced, thought out, designed to activate the moment he painted me as unstable. There was more. A list of employees. Names, notes, weak points. Single parent, needs stability. Ambitious, wants promotion. Loyal to Elena, convinced carefully. I sat back in my chair, the room suddenly very still. They had studied my team like inventory. Adam wasn't just trying to leave me. He was trying to dismantle the life I built piece by piece and rebuild it in his image, with my people, my clients, my reputation stripped down and repurposed. For a moment, anger flared, hot and sharp. Then it passed. Anger clouds judgment, and I needed clarity. I called the only person who could hear this without flinching. My attorney. I did not cry on that call. I did not dramatize. I laid out facts the same way I would in a board meeting. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then she said, "Do not respond to him, do not warn him, we move quietly from here." I looked again at the files, at the arrogance of assuming I would crumble before I could organize. Adam thought I would react emotionally. What he forgot was this. I built a company by staying calm under pressure. And this was just another crisis that needed solving. Diane Holloway listened without interrupting. Not once. I sat across from her desk, laptop open, folders neatly labeled, while she reviewed the evidence with the focus of someone who had seen every kind of deception and wasn't impressed by any of it. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair. "This isn't a marital disagreement," she said. "This is a coordinated attempt to remove you from your own company." Her tone was calm, almost clinical. She began outlining the steps with precision. Emergency injunction, temporary restriction was in place. "I do not respond to any accusations," she said. "Let them hang in the air, we'll answer with facts." I nodded, already shifting into execution mode. "Your husband believes emotional pressure will make you slip," Diane continued. "Men like this depend on reactions. You're not going to give him one." Before I left her office, she stopped me. "One more thing," she said. "People like your husband rarely act alone. Once pressure is applied, others will start talking." She was right. That night, my phone lit up with messages from numbers I hadn't heard from in years. Apologies wrapped in explanations, half confessions, quiet warnings. The silence around Adam was breaking. And while he was busy crafting narratives, I was doing what I had always done best. Preparing. Because the next move would not happen in a courtroom or a bedroom. It would happen in a boardroom. That night, I stayed alone in a hotel room downtown. The room was quiet in a way my house had never been. No voices, no tension hiding behind politeness, just silence and city lights outside the window. For the first time since everything began, the the weight of it all finally hit me. I sat on the edge of the bed, still in my work clothes, staring at nothing. My hands trembled, not from fear but from exhaustion. 12 years of carrying more than my share had caught up with me in a single evening. I cried then, not loudly, not dramatically, just enough to let the pressure release. I cried for the version of myself who had confused loyalty with self-erasure. For the nights I worked late while telling myself his resentment was temporary. For every time I softened my success so he could feel taller. When the tears stopped, something else took their place. Focus. I opened my laptop and began preparing for the morning. Slides, timelines, revenue breakdowns. Every fact clean and undeniable. This was not about revenge. This was about truth. By midnight, the room looked less like a hotel and more like a command center. Notes spread across the desk. Files synced and backed up twice. Adam thought the next day would be about controlling the story. He was wrong. It was going to be about ending it. I arrived at the office before sunrise. The building was quiet, the kind of quiet that only exists before something irreversible happens. Security nodded as I passed. The cleaners waved. People who had seen me here at all hours over the years. People who knew who actually worked. The conference room lights came on one by one. I set up methodically. Financial records on one end of the table, client contracts on the other, a single screen at the front waiting for slides that would not flatter anyone. At 10 sharp, Adam walked in. He wore the confident expression I had seen 1,000 times, the smile that suggested control, the posture of a man who believed the room would bend for him. He began speaking before anyone else could. "I know there have been concerns about recent instability," he said, glancing briefly in my direction. "I want to reassure the board that I am taking steps to protect the company." That was when Diane stood. "We will not be discussing opinions," she said calmly. "We will be discussing evidence." The air shifted. I stood next and turned on the screen. The first slide appeared, messages, dates, his words. "Document everything. Frame it as concern. If she reacts emotionally, it helps us." Adam's face tightened. "These messages were taken out of context," he said quickly. "This is a personal matter being dragged into business." I clicked to the next slide. A revenue breakdown. 2 columns, my name, his name. Over 2 years, every major contract was attributed, negotiated, closed, managed. My column was full. His was empty. A board member leaned forward. "Adam," she asked, "can you identify a single account you personally secured during this period?" He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. I moved to the next slide. Client testimonials, emails praising leadership, strategy, execution, everyone addressed to me. Several mentioned tolerating Adam's presence only out of courtesy. The room grew colder. Then the final slide. The registration documents for the shadow company. Same market, similar name, planned outreach timelines. "This," I said evenly, "was designed to activate once I was discredited." Adam stood abruptly. "This is a misunderstanding. Mark had his own agenda. You all know how emotional Elena can be." That was his mistake. One of the clients spoke then, calm, measured. "We have never considered Adam a decision maker," he said. "Elena is this company." Silence. The kind that swallows arguments whole. Adam sat back down slowly, his confidence gone, replaced by calculation that came too late. Diane closed her folder. "The board has everything it needs," she said. And in that moment the story Adam had spent months writing collapsed under the weight of the truth. Not with shouting. Not with drama. But with facts he could not outrun. Once the board meeting ended, the silence did not return. It cracked. Within hours, my phone filled with messages I never expected to receive, not from Adam but from the people around him. Wives, girlfriends, business acquaintances who had sat quietly in rooms where plans were made. One message came from Laura, the wife of one of Adam's closest friends. She wrote, "I'd been listening to him come home and brag for months. I started recording because something felt wrong." She sent audio files, laughter, detailed explanations of how they planned to frame me, how confident Adam sounded describing my supposed breakdown. Another message followed from Emily, a woman I had met only twice at dinner parties. She attached screenshots, draft emails, lists of clients with notes about who would be easiest to manipulate, employees reduced to bullet points and vulnerabilities. It became clear this was not just about my marriage. It was a pattern. Men coaching each other on how to stay in control while appearing reasonable, teaching manipulation as strategy, calling it leadership. Diane reviewed the new evidence without emotion. "This moves beyond civil disputes," she said. "This becomes intent. And intent changes everything." I did not feel triumphant. I felt steady. Because when truth finally surfaces, it rarely arrives all at once. It comes in waves, carried by people who are tired of being quiet. Adam had built his plan in private. It was unraveling in public. And there was no way to stop it now. The divorce was finalized months later on a gray morning that felt quieter than I expected. No raised voices, no accusations, no last attempts to rewrite the past. Adam sat across from me at the table, smaller somehow. The confidence that once filled every room was gone, replaced by a tension he could not hide. He did not look at me when the papers were placed in front of him. Diane reviewed the terms one final time. I retained full ownership of the company. The house. All intellectual property. There would be no alimony, no future claims, a strict non-compete clause that would keep him far away from the industry he tried to steal. Adam's lawyer said nothing. There was nothing left to negotiate. When it came time to sign, Adam hesitated. "I never meant for it to go this far," he said quietly. I met his eyes for the first time that day. "You planned for it to go exactly this far," I replied. "You just didn't expect to lose." He nodded once and signed. As he stood to leave, he whispered an apology. It sounded rehearsed, late, weightless. I did not respond. Because the real closure did not come from words. It came from walking out of that room with my name intact, my work protected, and my future finally my own. Life did not magically become easy after the divorce. It became clear. The company stabilized faster than anyone expected. Decisions that once took days now took minutes. Meetings ended on time. The tension that had lived quietly in the background was gone, and in its place was momentum. Clients noticed, so did the team. Without Adam's interference, projects moved forward cleanly. New contracts came in. Opportunities I had once postponed out of consideration were suddenly possible again. But the most unexpected change came through my inbox. Messages from women I had never met. They wrote about overhearing similar conversations, about being slowly painted as difficult, emotional, unstable, about shrinking themselves to keep peace with men who quietly resented their competence. They didn't thank me for revenge. They thanked me for clarity. One message stayed with me. "I thought I was crazy until I heard your story. Now I know I was being managed, not loved." Adam sent a letter during that time, 3 pages long, apologetic in tone, defensive in substance. Even in regret, he claimed shared credit for my success. I read it once. Then I filed it away and locked the drawer. Not out of anger, but as a reminder. Some people stand in the ruins of what they destroyed and still believe they deserve a share of what survived. I no longer needed to explain myself. I was busy building again. I saw him months later in a grocery store on a quiet weekday afternoon. He stood in the aisle comparing prices, shoulders slightly hunched, the confidence that once announced him gone. His clothes were ordinary, unremarkable. He looked like someone trying not to be noticed. For a moment our eyes met. I recognized the hesitation immediately, the instinct to approach, to explain, to reclaim a version of himself that no longer existed. He took one step toward me, then stopped. Not because I looked angry. Because I didn't look at him at all. I returned my attention to the shelf in front of me, reading labels, making a decision, continuing my day. The same calm focus I used in meetings, the same indifference reserved for problems already solved. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw him abandon his cart and turn away. Fast. As if staying any longer would force him to face something he could not undo. I did not feel satisfaction. I felt free. Because the opposite of love is not hate. It is irrelevance. Is. And in that aisle, under fluorescent lights and ordinary choices, I understood the final truth. The real power was never in proving my worth. It was in no longer needing him to see it. For a long time I thought revenge meant watching someone fall. I was wrong. Revenge is not destruction, it is separation. It is the moment you stop arguing with someone who has already decided not to see you clearly. Adam did not lose because I exposed him. He lost because I stopped carrying him. I did not win by shouting or humiliating him. I won by telling the truth once, protecting my work, and walking forward without dragging his ego behind me. If there is one thing I want you to take from this story, it is this. Pay attention to patterns, not promises. Listen to how someone talks about you when they think you are not listening. And never confuse silence with peace. If this story felt familiar, you are not alone. Too many people are taught to shrink in order to be loved. Too many are told that endurance is the same as loyalty. It is not. If Elena's journey resonated with you, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who might need to hear it, and tell me in the comments which moment stayed with you the longest. Subscribe to The Art of Revenge for more real stories about strength, boundaries, and quiet justice. Because the most powerful ending is not revenge,